Continuing reading The Great Wheel by Robert Lawson. We're in chapter 11. Here's the picture for that front of that page. Con and Uncle Patrick did not take off the hard-won 9 days. Uncle Patrick was never happy unless working, and Con was glad to have the extra pay. He was saving his money and now had quite a bit put by. The two Norwegians went as sailors on one of the lake boats. Schreimer set off for San Francisco. Later, he said he might give Australia a whirl. Stonewall and most of the steel workers departed for other jobs. Con was sorry to see them go. He had made many warm friends among the daring, happy-go-lucky crew, and his admiration for the general was unbounded. In Con's gallery of heroes, Stonewall Jackson ranked close to Mr. Ferris and Uncle Patrick. To his relief, Martin Brennan decided to stay on. Uncle Patrick could use him for a while. So busy had they been that they had scarcely noted the actual opening of the fair some 2 weeks before. True, on their way to and from work, they were aware that the lawns were now beautiful greensward, the shrubbery in full leaf. Where formerly they had picked their way over the frozen hummocks, they now trod neatly graveled paths. The lagoons were filled. Everywhere, elaborate fountains spouted jets and sprays of water. At night, millions of the new electric lights outlined the buildings, flooded the immense courts and plazas with brilliant light. On May 1st, working high up in the wheel, they had seen the immense ant-like throng flowing out of the new railroad station and spreading over the grounds. There had been bands, parades, salutes of cannon. From the midway now arose a never-ceasing medley of sound. Blaring calliopes, the crackle of shooting galleries, German bands, and the raucous bellowing of sideshow barkers. But for them, the wheel was the fair. Until it was completed, little else was worthy of notice. Secluded by a high board fence, they went about their work as oblivious of the milling crowds and the activity outside as they had in the wind-swept days of February. Next day, as they approached the wheel, Uncle Patrick gave a startled exclamation. Holy saints, and what would this be? A circus or a traveling botanical garden or what? No, by gory, it's the passenger cars have arrived. Here's the passenger cars that are going to be hung. A string of flat cars stood on the siding. On each one stood a long enclosed car gleaming with plate glass, fresh paint, and polished brass. Mr. Ferris and various others were examining them. Well, sir, you've done yourself proud, Uncle Patrick cried. Mr. Pullman's finest palace cars are no more elegant. They were, indeed, impressive. Strongly but lightly built on steel frames. The four sides were mostly occupied by windows of heavy plate glass. At either end of the car was a mahogany door fitted with shiny brass hardware. The interiors were commodious. 24 feet long by 13 feet wide. About the size, Con marveled, of Uncle Michael's living room in New York. The floors were gay with carpets of green and pink, roses on a red background. Down the center stretched 2 rows of round, tufted plush seats, 38 in all. There were polished brass handrails below the windows and a monumental brass cuspidor on each corner. A row of glass-shaded electric lights encircled the ceiling. All told, the cars were gay and airy, flooded with light, and would afford a wonderful view. Hanging the cars to the wheel was simple and a pleasant change from the driving labor of the actual construction. At either end of each car rose strong hangers which matched holes in the rims of the wheel. As the car was jacked up into position under the wheel, a long steel axle was slid through the holes and hangers and bolted fast to the rims. And the job was done, the car free to swing easily as the wheel turned. Their only difficulty was Uncle Patrick's ferocious solicitude for the plate glass and shiny paint. You'd think we were handling the Venus de Mielo herself, the way he carries on, Martin Brennan chuckled. As each car was hung, the wheel was revolved slightly with winch and tackle to receive the next. The driving mechanism was not yet completed, although the engine had arrived and mechanics were busy installing it. The relaxed pace gave Con and Martin a little more time to explore the fair. The evenings were long now, the air pleasant. After dinner, most nights, they would stroll over and look around. The exhibits were interesting, many quite impressive, but before long they always ended up at the German village or Old Vienna, where Con eagerly scanned the crowds looking for a familiar face. The visitors here were mostly Germans, almost all happily eating and drinking. There must be all the Germans in America here, said Con hopelessly. And with the scattering from Canada, likely, Martin agreed. Lots of blue-eyed lasses with yellow hair, but none would interest you. If there was only a laundry or a wash tub now, it's there we'd be finding her, surely, scrubbing somebody or something. Well, the summer is long, Con reflected. She'll be bound to come sometime. If he couldn't find her, at least he could write. Dear Trudy, the cars for the wheel have come, and we're hanging them. They're that elegant. And big, much bigger than I was looking for. One of them would make a nice little house to be living in. I've seen many a cottage in Ireland with smaller. Uncle Patrick says all a fellow would need to make it a home would be a cook stove and a dog and a cat. Martin Brennan says a wife would be handy too, but Uncle Patrick says it's an unnecessary complication. Martin Brennan and I go to the German village in Old Vienna almost every evening looking for you, but we haven't seen you yet. Aren't Germans the great ones for eating? Your friend, Con. A trainload of lumber arrived, accompanied by a small army of carpenters. Offices, ticket booths, ramps, runways, and waiting rooms sprang up with the overnight suddenness of mushrooms. Broad flights of steps and covered platforms for the passengers grew. The platforms were on 3 different levels so that 6 cars could be loaded and unloaded at one time. Electricians swarmed over the wheel, stringing wires for the lights. Painters were everywhere. Gardeners tidied the grounds. Under the wheel itself, the mechanics worked steadily on the driving mechanism. Con and Martin had often speculated on how this huge weight of steel with its loaded cars would be revolved safely. Now they learned. In building the wheel, they had noticed that the steel plates that formed the outer circumference were cut every 2 feet by semicircle notches. The reason for these now became clear. The driving mechanism was simply 2 enormous link chains, similar to mammoth bicycle chains. The cross links of these chains were steel bars about the size of rolling pins. When the chains were stretched under the wheel, these crossbars fitted exactly into the notches of the rims and thus carried the engine's driving force for the wheel. Here you can see that mechanism. It's like a bicycle chain. Surprisingly enough, the engine, although a beautifully built affair, was quite small, a fact which was explained to them by the elderly engineer. "'Tis not speed we want," he said with a smile, "to be making the passengers seasick and calling on their maker. The way it's geared down, the wheel will be revolving slow and majestic, while little Betsy here whirls away, busy as a grandmother's spinning wheel. 'Tis dignity we'll have, and power and perfect control. The way the cars will start and come to rest without the passenger's awareness. It's a beautiful arrangement Mr. Ferris has made for driving that mighty mass of steel and humanity. The work of a genius indeed." He went back to polishing the engine's already mirror-like brasswork. That evening, Con sat in their room at Mrs. Murphy's writing a letter to Trudy. Uncle Patrick, his huge frame tilted back in a rocker, eyed his nephew's efforts with an amused smile. Martin Brennan, stretched on his bed, appeared absorbed in a dime novel. "Con lad," Uncle Patrick said finally, "in a week or so I'll be leaving for a new job of Mr. Ferris's, the big cantilever bridge at St. Louis. Are you for it?" Con laid down his pencil, his brow wrinkled in thought. He had known that this decision would have to come sometime, but he had never really thought it out. He searched for words. "I don't know, Uncle Patrick," he answered doubtfully. "The work's fine, and I'm obligated to you. But I don't know. I don't think I want to be forever moving from one job to another with no home or settled place of my own. It's been a grand experience building the wheel, but now it's built, I don't seem to want to go off and leave it. I may be wanting to ride it like Aunt Honora said. You'll ride the greatest wheel in all the world. It's my fortune to ride it, not just to build it, and I don't think I want to be moving on." "If it's settling down you want, you could have done it well in New York," Uncle Patrick said. "You still can. You'll have a fine opportunity with Michael. Make bags of money. Be a partner someday. And from the way his Agnes looks you over, you'll likely be more than a partner." "She's my cousin," Con said. "Cousins don't marry." "Don't they indeed? The royal families of the world do little else. And who are you to be setting yourself above dukes and earls and princes? Well, I'm no prince, and I'm not marrying her. And I'm not slaving my life away building sewers for bags of money to be spending on apartments and dressing up like a dude every night. Going to the theaters and driving a carriage in the park. You'll be wanting to settle on a farm? Uncle Patrick asked. With cows, maybe? And to be making cheeses? Added Martin, grinning. Con reddened. A farm, maybe, he admitted. But anyway, someplace of my own. The way you can be driving a nail to hang your overalls on and know that tomorrow and next month and next year, the same nail will be there in the same place. It's the Kilroy in you, Uncle Patrick said resignedly. Your father, God rest his soul, had the love of the land on him, and nothing could stir him from his bit cottage and his acre or two of stony ground. I'm one for letting a man choose his own life, and good luck to him, and I'll not be influencing anyone to go a path that he can see no happiness in. At the least, I've made a man of you. The way you'll not be scratching ditches in the dirty streets in New York and catering to politicians that hand out the jobs, the kind you'd have to be counting the silver every time they came to dinner. Next morning, Uncle Patrick passed by the busy workers at the wheel and led Con straight to Mr. Ferris's office. Mr. Ferris, he said, my nephew has fallen enamored of your wheel the way he can't bear to be parted from it, even for the St. Louis job. Can you give him work of some sort, nursemaiding it? Very easily. Mr. Ferris laughed and looked at Con. I thought you were going to be a construction man, Con, he said. What's the matter? Don't you like it? I like it fine, sir, Con said, only that he doesn't want to be a migrating tramp like his crazy uncle. Uncle Patrick interrupted. To always be roaming the country from one job to the next without kith or kin or any settled home with a nail to hang his overalls on. Perhaps he's right at that, Mr. Ferris said, and thought for a moment. We need guards for the cars, he said. 36 cars, 36 guards. They must be sober, responsible, polite, tactful, and physically fit. We will handle well over 1 million people in the next 4 months, and among that many there are bound to be some problems. You will have to deal with the timid old ladies, drunks, fussy old gentlemen, an occasional nut, and thousands of children, good, bad, and very bad. Do you think you can handle the job? I can try, Con said. I've always got along pretty good with people. Fine. Oh, yes, and you'll have to wear a uniform. It's pretty fancy. Mrs. Ferris designed it, a sort of combination of policeman, admiral, and lion tamer. Do you mind? No, sir, Con said with a grin. Good. Mr. Ferris wrote a short note and handed it to Con. Take this to Sergeant Keough, late of the Chicago Police Department. He's in charge of the guards. You will have car number 1. You helped hang it, so it's your due. He turned to Uncle Patrick. Well, Pat, he laughed, you will have to manage that St. Louis job without him. You've lost a good steelman, and I've gained a good guard.